Hi, I'm Claire LeCan, and I'm the current chair of the Agribusiness Committee at the Fairboat Area Chamber of Commerce. Our purpose is to promote agriculture education and careers, as well as advocate relationships and help advance relationships between farmers and other businesses. So to accomplish these goals, we take on a number of initiatives as a committee. We conduct the Ag in the Classroom program, where some of our members visit third grade classes to teach them about production agriculture, and then the classes visit local farms for educational tours. And for some kids, it's the first time they have learned about farming or ever been to a farm, and the light bulbs that go off in their heads are incredible. It's great. One of our newer initiatives is supporting the Cradle to Career and Pathway programs in the schools, where we support agriculture curriculum and aim to help students with internship and employment opportunities at local ag businesses. Members of our committee also help organize the Best of the Best in Agriculture Awards at the Rice County Fair, which includes inducting individuals or families into the Rice County Hall of Fame. And we conduct a farmer appreciation project during harvest to thank farmers for all you do. If you'd like to learn more about the committee or you're interested in potentially joining, please feel free to talk to any of us committee members or to Cassie here at the chamber. And I'll turn it over to John DeVore, who is a committee member and also our MC here today.
Thank you, Claire, and thanks to all of the members on our committee for putting the hard work into this to make this possible. I just want to thank everybody too, and I'm going to echo what everybody, the last two people said about coming, but I just want you all to know that we just really appreciate what you as farmers do in agriculture for Rice County. And it's a way that we can bring everybody together, because we need to work together to get agriculture that's happening out in the rural areas, and the importance that we need to know about what's happening in our community also. Because the two of us, we need to work together in order to make agriculture successful. We need each other. We need the people that are having the stores and the businesses in town to sell our product that we produce on the farm. So what a great way that we can get together and celebrate agriculture and provide a breakfast in our appreciation for all of the hard work that not only the farmers do, but everybody else concerned with agriculture. So with that being said, I know that everybody's here and waiting for time to eat, so let's move into the breakfast. And if everybody will bow their heads for a short invocation, we'll get started with our breakfast. Let us bow our heads. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day and for the food that you help provide, and for this opportunity to come together, the people that are involved with agriculture. We ask that you not only bless them, but also help guide them through this new growing season. We also thank you for your wisdom and for the help of those that are here today that have difficult decisions to make to help produce the needs that we need in our stores and to survive for the world. We ask this in your heavenly name. Amen. So our next speaker is going to be Lynn Kelson. He's from the Lender Network, and he's going to come and tell you all about agriculture.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Good to be with you today here, celebrating National Ag Day. And I actually spoke at the National Ag Day event in New York a few years ago, and it was an interesting event because nobody there had ever been on a farm before. And what a change it is to be here in Faribault and Rice County, Steele County, surrounding areas where we understand the importance of agriculture. It certainly is a way of life here. Well, speaking of that, our friend Ole and Lars, our friends, were talking the other day, and Lars looked at Ole and he said, Ole, what in the world happened to your ear? It's fried to a crisp, both of your ears. And Ole said that Lina said she's so dumb, she left the iron plugged in right next to the telephone, and when the phone rang, I picked up the iron and I burned my ear. And Lars thought about it, and he said, well, Ole, I can understand how you burn one ear, what happened to the other one? He said, well, the guy called me back. So Lena wasn't so dumb after all. You know, agriculture really is is not only a way of life, but we're so blessed to have a strong agriculture. Look at what's going on around the world right now. In Russia and Ukraine. In fact, I was there about 10, 15 years ago and had a chance to spend time in both of those countries. And Russia, the major problem they have is they cannot feed themselves. In fact, that's why the old Soviet Union broke up. They did not have the ability to produce enough food to feed themselves. Ukraine, on the other hand, is the breadbasket of Europe. And I don't know why this stuff's going on. They're happy to sell grain to Russia, but it's just frightening to see the images that we're seeing there right now. Here in the U.S., we must be self-sufficient. I think we're learning that right now. We have to be self-sufficient in food. And right now, one farmer feeds 160 people. In 1960, one farmer fed 25 people. 22 million people are in ag-related fields. So we have to be self-sufficient when it comes to food, and I think we're learning we're going to have to be self-sufficient once again when it comes to energy. We're going to have to produce more and more biofuels, ethanol, biodiesel. In fact, the numbers are interesting. Ken probably will talk about them. If we went to a 15% ethanol blend nationwide, it would make up for all of the oil that we're importing right now from Russia. Why don't we grow our own fuel in this country? Go to a 30% blend and quit importing from countries like that. We can do it here, agriculture can do it, and we're learning that all the time. People ask me, what changes have you seen over the years? What's the biggest change that you've seen in agriculture? And there's been a lot of changes, many, many changes. I think number one is we're farming now by the inch instead of by the field. Back when I was growing up on a farm in eastern Iowa, we would go out and plow or harrow or disc and not worry about lapping over where we'd already been. Now with the new technology, and it's not that new, but with the technology, we may overlap by 1 inch. And that's it, because we conserve fuel and we conserve the soil. So that is a huge change that we've seen in agriculture. The other thing, we are realizing that we are in a world agriculture, and we ship our products all over the world. And we follow what's going on in Brazil, we follow what's going on in Argentina, in China, and countries all over the world. Just a few numbers before we move on here. Americans spend 10% of their disposable income on food. 10%. It wasn't that long ago, the numbers were almost 50%. 10%, 1 out of every 2 meals, and even more than that, are eaten outside of the home. Now, all of you remember when you were growing up, how many meals did you eat out? Not very many. When I grew up on a farm, we would go into town to the A&W twice a year and get a sack of hamburgers, and that was eating out. That was all we ate out. And it's changed dramatically. We've seen a 50% decline in wind erosion since 1982. Farmers are farming to conserve the soil. And U.S. farmers produce 262% more food with 2% fewer inputs. So family farms, 97% of all farms in the country are family farms. We are not a corporate agriculture world yet. We're still family farmers, and that's very, very important. Well, I'd like to introduce at this time Jeff Dagey, General Manager of Quality Equipment and Service in Faribault. Jeff, about a round of applause.
How's it going, everybody? I thank you for coming out. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our company. We are also a family-owned and operated company. We have 5 locations across the state. I work at our Faribault location. We're a Kubota dealer here. We provide service, sales, and rentals. We also sell a couple other brands and manufacturers, but Kubota is the main sponsor for this luncheon. We started out in the late 80s as a forklift service company, and my dad grew the company through the mid-2000s, focused on forklifts. Into the teens, we got into construction equipment and ag equipment, and we brought the focus on the service that came from our roots into that market, and it's been serving us very, very well because our customers are very receptive to the quality of service that we provide to them. We do on-site service, we do service at our location there, and then we can also haul your equipment in for you. If you guys have any questions, you can see me at our table or at the table here, and I can be more than glad to tell you more about our company. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next, I'd like to introduce Patrice Bailey. Originally from Harlem, New York, has been with the Minnesota Department of Agriculture for 3.5 years and is Assistant Commissioner. And we would like to bring Patrice on up right now. Come on up. How about a round of applause?
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm in place of my boss, Tom Peterson, who is at the Capitol as we speak, testifying in regards to the drought bill. So the whole team is sort of spread out right now. So that is some of the things that he's doing. But I'm just really happy to be here. I think that National Ag Day should be every day, but seeing that we are here today, happy National Ag Day today. So this is a time when we celebrate farmers and agriculture, so celebrating those who provide food for the world and being able to feed Minnesota as well. One thing about myself, coming from New York, there isn't a lot of agriculture in New York City. I grew up 5 blocks from the Apollo Theater, for anyone who has ever been to New York, in Harlem. And it wasn't until my senior year, my mom was saying that, what are you going to do? You have 6 months left and you're not going to be staying here. So I said, well, I want to go to law school. And she said, there's too many lawyers. Why don't you do something where you can feed yourself in any place of the world you may happen to be? And of course I said, well, what is that? And she said, agriculture. And I was like, agriculture? I want to be a farmer. And it wasn't until I went to college in Texas and I went to the World Food Expo in Chicago. And I'm not sure how many people remember Patrice Farm used to have a particular gentleman that used to sort of ride and sit on a hammock and talk about how great the food and the Patrice Farm cookies were. Well, when I walked into the World Expo, the guy was sitting right there. His name is Charlie Welch. And after speaking to Charlie Welch for about an hour, I was sold on why agriculture is sort of the thing for me. So it's definitely something that I've actually had in good stead, and then moving out here from Iowa State for grad school has sort of brought me to the Midwest. So that's how I made myself here. So that is my story of going into agriculture, and agriculture is in a good place. I can tell you that. Although with this $9.5 billion surplus that we have, it's not including the American Rescue Plan money that's coming. That's another $1.5 billion, so we can really be looking at $11 billion when it's all said and done. So, as you can imagine, things at the Capitol are pretty crazy with all the money that's sitting out there right now. So, I would say stay tuned. We'll see what happens. But just a few facts about Minnesota. We have 67,000 farms thereabout, 2,000 or so dairy farms that are actually, that number is actually have gone down. We're number one nationally in turkeys and soybean and sugar beet production, and number 2 in pork production, as well as soybean production. and we have a thriving economy in all those different levels. And I always say that it's great to celebrate all the farmers that we have, because, you know, the travels that I've done in Minnesota is definitely amazing to see how big the state is. But right now, Minnesota is basically on high alert right now. We're in this whole issue around high path avian influenza right now. We're hoping that African swine fever does never come here to Minnesota, but right now it's in the Dominican Republic. And so, you know, we're making sure that we're on high alert for this influenza that's coming around. It's all around Minnesota, so Wisconsin, South Dakota, and 20 other states as we speak. So we do not want it to come here because it would decimate the poultry industry, and we don't want to depopulate any birds at all. The last time that happened, it was in 2015. And so NDA is working with our partners, Board of Animal Health, and other farm organizations to prepare for that particular situation. The country is in an important situation as we speak right now, as we know that farmers are really concerned about biosecurity. As you heard earlier about the supply chain and things that are happening with biofuels and energy, there's never more time to actually be concerned about these different things than it is right now. So, you know, the priorities that we have for MDA at the legislature this year is around soil health and initiatives. Meat processing is a big issue, so we've been working on having smaller locker type plants and building support for third crops and drought relief. Of course, you know, disease preparedness is all part of the issue. The last thing I'm going to talk about is emerging farmers. That's part of the portfolio that I have as well. In the last Farm Fest, there was an announcement about the license plate contest. And so when that license plate contest was given to me to finish it, we finished it in December, helped with and by FFA and 4-H. So this is the sample plate right here. I'm waiting for my plate to come in right now, but the plate is available at every DMV as we speak. I'm glad that it's over because it's been a long process, but it's a great one because now we have at least I have our first plate. I also want to just end with this is that we also have an emerging farmer office that we got last legislative session, and we're just sort of in the process of the building blocks of that particular office, and to support farmers around the state. And it's important to support our Hmong, Black, Latino veterans and indigenous farmers as well. Rice County is a thriving local food movement that provides opportunities to farmers in the Twin Cities and Rochester. And that is it. I just want to say thank you again, and happy National Ag Day.
Next up, I'd like to call a good friend of mine, Kent Teesey, Senior Vice President of Minstar. He's got 40 years of experience in farm management. He's been the forum chairman for Farm Fest for a lot of years, Kent. And we work together both on the air and off the air. And Kent's just one of the great guys in Minnesota agriculture. And let's give him a warm welcome. Kent Teesey.
Well, great to be here. Thanks, Lynn and Patrice. Between Lynn and Patrice, they gave a good overview here, I think. Kind of led into my discussion, and I'll try not to repeat some of the things they said, but, and Lynn kind of covered, My experience in agriculture started with the University of Minnesota Extension for 28 years, and since then, in 2003, I've been in the ag lending business and doing some writing and speaking about agriculture. So I'd just like to second what Patrice said. This is National Ag Day, and certainly want to wish everyone, as he said, it should be every day. And a lot of times I think people's perception is just what Patrice said, that you think, hey, it's farming. I remember when I was in high school, my counselor said I was going to go to ag school. He said, what do you want to go there? You don't want to be a farmer. And unfortunately, we've seen that in education, and I commend Brad and Megan and some of the others that are South Central College, and now with Minnesota State University and Green Seam, and the efforts going on there to change that image, because there's a lot of opportunities in agriculture, and we just need to recognize that as you go up and down the street, and all of you and the businesses and industries you're in, a lot of ties to agriculture, and I think we brought it out in full focus in the last couple of years. First with the COVID outbreak, and all of a sudden we realized that we can't take food and energy and things for granted, and now with the Russia-Ukraine situation, and all of a sudden it's kind of changed. I think people realize a lot different. You know, it was interesting, I think Lynn talked about the number of people that are eating out and eating at home. COVID kind of changed that trend a little bit when you look at the numbers. And it was interesting, I live in Lake Crystal, and our fire department does a rib feed every year as a fundraiser, and they had it last Saturday. And they only have the capacity to do about 250 racks of ribs, or rib dinners. And normally they run it from 4:30 to 8 o'clock at night, and they might run out at 7:30. Well, last Saturday they ran out at 5:30 after an hour, and the reason I asked them, I said, well, what happened? And they said they started doing this with COVID, to take them out to people's homes. They took half of those meals for home delivery, because people called up for home delivery, so they ran out for the people they were serving. So really kind of a little bit of a change. Anyway, I could talk about, when John called me, he didn't really give me any details on what to talk about. I could have picked any number of things, but certainly we got to start out, as Lynn and Patrice, I think, both referred to, the situation in Ukraine. And as was mentioned, Ukraine is often categorized as the breadbasket of Europe. And a lot of times, unless we really are into agriculture or been there like some folks, you don't really think much about it. But Ukraine, 70% of that country is actually tillable farmland. And that's a pretty high percentage. And their weather is a lot like southern Minnesota and Iowa. They plant their crops at the same time. It's very productive soil. It's a very modern type of agriculture. And you can see there, they rank very high. Number 1 in sunflowers. They're in the top 6 or 7 in corn, barley, top 10 in wheat, even soybeans. And wheat is a big one, of course, for food production. And as is sunflower. Sunflower oil, again, they're the biggest in the world for that. And that's used in a lot of cooking. So it's very big, and it's probably not going to affect us as much in the United States. But again, as was pointed out earlier, agriculture is global. And a lot of their products, they sit right on the Black Sea. And of course, where's Russia been, besides on the north end trying to get to the capital, they're trying to control all the ports on the Black Sea. And a lot of their products go to other countries in Europe, but also to the Middle East. And of course, that isn't the most stable part of the world. And what happens when people get hungry? You start to have issues. So that's how you get domino effects from some of this stuff. And it all relates to food production. So again, very critical situation there. Now obviously, We haven't heard a lot in the news about the agriculture part, but we have heard about the oil part. And this is more related to Russia because that's where we get our oil. And you can see, actually, we don't get a huge portion of the oil imports in the U.S. from Russia. But again, we're in a worldwide situation. And if there's one market that is worldwide, it's certainly the oil market. And that's kind of what's kind of catching up here to the United States. The other big thing that it affects agriculture directly is fertilizer. Russia, as you can see, Canada, now this is just potash, but you can see Canada, we get most of it from, as far as potash producers. Russia is second, and then on down the line. But if you threw nitrogen on there, nitrogen fertilizer is also very high. So when we disrupt the whole world market here and we start banning imports of these products, or it affects world trade, it does affect that. Back to Ukraine, there's a lot of farmers there may not even grow a crop this year because they can't get the inputs, and even if they could, they don't know if they'd be able to grow it. They raise a lot of winter wheat there. They can't get the nitrogen to put on their winter wheat. Some crops have been destroyed. So they got a lot of issues going on over there. Let's switch gears a little bit now and bring it back to the United States. Both Lynn and Patrice pointed out that it's been some good times in farming. This chart goes all the way back to 1980. If you're in the back, the red line is net cash income, and the black line net farm income, and the blue bars on the bottom are the amount of government payments that farmers have gotten. And the difference between cash income and farm income, just for your little economics lesson, cash income is what's reported on your tax returns, basically. What farmers report, what they actually sold in a year, and minus their expenses. The net farm income is adjusted for inventories, that type of thing, depreciation, accrually adjusted. So that's the difference in the two. And you can see it's been very strong. We had the downturn there in about from 1915 to 18, and then it started going up, and it may come down a little in 22, but that was the projection by USDA before prices started going up. So we've certainly seen a change. And the one thing I'd like you to notice is on the far right. When we had 2020, when the income started improving, a lot of that was due to extra government payments. About over 40% of the net farm income that year nationally came from extra government payments. We still had the payments for the China trade war, and then we had the COVID payments, and farmers got some PPP loan payments. And you notice that dropped back down, and that'll drop even further in 22. So the difference in the income is the income in 21 and now in 22 is more based on production and added prices. So that's the one thing that's changed there. This is kind of interesting to look at. This just shows that, again, these are national, not Rice County figures, but there's a lot of similarities. I think if you look at farm business management records through South Central College or whatever, you see a lot of these same trends. Notice that, again, we go back all the way to 1968. We had the downturn in the 80s, and we were kind of gradually coming up. But if you go out here, about right in here, you can see from about 2010, we saw farm assets increase. We had a little downturn again in that 15, 16, 17 area, but then back up. But also notice the red line, which is farm debt. Now what's interesting, the number that's circled there, if you look from 2004 to 14, assets increased 96% and debt 75%. So assets are going up faster than debt. But from 2014 to 21, assets only increased by 11% and debt 29%. So we have seen, now that's kind of adjusting a little bit, I think, for those that are lending in the room as we went through 21 and 22. But you can see that certainly farmers are increasing their assets. An interesting fact, and I read this, that 80% of the assets in the United States on farms is in land. So that's kind of an interesting thing. It was mentioned we're in a global economy. Exports are extremely important, and you can get into individual numbers, but since we kind of resolved that China trade war, we have really grown our exports. Last year was 177 billion, was the highest we've ever had, a record, and that was 14% higher than the previous high, which was 14, and 18% above a year earlier. Where do our products go, our ag exports? China is number one, Mexico and Canada are not too far behind. Those three are the big ones. And then you see a lot of the Asian countries. So again, the scary thing, I think, of the situation with Russia and Ukraine is if it becomes worldwide and starts affecting more parts of the world. Soybeans are key. You can see almost half of our soybeans are going to exports. This was back in 2020 where it was 48%. And a big chunk of those are going to China. I know the Soybean Association, they used to have that chart or that picture where they'd say every third row of soybeans was being raised to go to China. So when we had that trade war with China, the soybean market really took a hit on that deal. Now if you ask farmers, now I just talked the big picture here, this survey was done back in around the 1st of February by a public ag publication, national ag publication. What's the biggest issue on their mind? Now you see that big blue area? That was their concern, was getting enough inputs, adequate inputs for the current growing season. The next big area, the gray area there, was locking in prices. Then you have the orange area there, maintaining landowner relations. And finally, that little yellow area there, or that was maintaining that. The orange area was getting the parts to fix the equipment. So those were the biggest concerns they had. Now let's talk about a few of these just briefly. Input costs. And you can see they just shot up. Now we've obviously prices have, but so have inputs. Big one is fertilizer. This chart was back around the first of the year, and just about every type of fertilizer had went up anywhere from 60 to 90%. If that chart was today, back to the same period, most of those would be at probably 80 to over 100%. So basically what it costs to fertilize an acre of corn a year ago, it's almost doubled today, or in some cases is. Now some folks have locked in their fertilizer, but certainly as we look ahead to next year, and I already showed you the concerns over in Russia with getting fertilizer out of Russia, so there are concerns. This was another one that just came out recently in February, another poll. They asked farmers, have you had difficulty getting inputs for the current growing season? And you can see the 57% yes. And interestingly, fertilizer was number 2 on there. Number 1 was herbicides. And herbicides, of course, are used to control weeds. And there's certain herbicides that have just not been available. The supply chain has kind of cut those off. And so, again, if farmers aren't able to get some of these, or down the road, fungicides for diseases, insecticides, that could create some issues going down the road. Supply chain issues, they've kind of went out of the news with all this, but a lot of these haven't been resolved. And this is true not just with these crop inputs, but it's also true with getting parts. If you're putting a facility up, getting building materials, if you order equipment. I just had a farmer, he ordered a new planter that was supposed to be here right after the first of the year, and it's tied up, they can't get the planter. He had to go back and find his old one and get it back because he can't get the new planter hopefully later this year. And that's a lot of equipment now you have to order now to get it for 2023. And so, and not just supply chain issues, but labor issues, getting adequate labor on the farm, for farms are challenging. Another one that was on that list was concerns landowner issues, but certainly land values and rental rates have really exploded. We see land values go up. Again, this chart was a couple months ago showing land values in Minnesota up 26%, Iowa 28%. They've continued to go up. Year over year right now, a lot of them are 30 to 40% increases. And it used to be unusual as you traveled across southern Minnesota to hear a farm that sold for over $10,000 an acre, and that's become kind of commonplace in the last couple of months. And not all farms are, but there's certainly more and more of them. And so, well, that's probably good if you're selling the land. It gets a little challenging, obviously, for the person buying the land. Obviously, farmers have had some good years. There's also been more investors coming in, buying some of the land. There's strong interest in it. Rental rates have also been going up, but not quite at the same pace as land values, at least to this point, but they're certainly on the way up as well. The other one that was on that survey was grain marketing, grain and livestock marketing. And again, it's easy to sit back and say, well, look at the prices that farmers are getting for their corn or their soybeans or their hogs. We got close to record prices, especially in the grains. They got to be making big money. But when you're a farmer, you have no guarantee there. You're not guaranteed. You might know your costs, but you don't know at the time, many times when you're planting, or if you're, first of all, you don't know if you're going to get the crop, so you can't market what you don't have. And so it's hard to know, and a lot of times what happens, farmers, once they do get to a profit level, and this happened a lot a year ago, coming out of 2020, when we had low prices for several years in a row, many farmers sold their crop well before we had the price increase. And not that it was a bad decision, it was at a profitable level, but they weren't getting the big money that maybe some folks talking at the coffee shop or the bar thought they were getting, because they didn't get it. And I always like this chart. This is kind of a chart that's like 40 years old, kind of the cycle of marketing grain, or it could be livestock, but you kind of get to the point where the market's going up, so now I'm going to hold out for the top, then goes over the top, and pretty soon you're back to wishful thinking. Now the difference, what we've seen in the last 6 to 12 months, instead of going through this cycle in a whole year, we go through it about every 2 or 3 weeks. We get 30, 40 cent moves in the market almost every day, up or down. And yet, again, if you're a farmer, that can be pretty nerve-wracking, especially if you're trying to make those decisions, both on grain you have in the bin, or grain that you haven't even planted yet, and trying to decide what level to market it at. And especially if you don't have all your inputs, and I talked about that difference in inputs. So how do you survive in these times? I think you just, have regular cash flows and balance sheets. You don't just do it once a year. You kind of look at where you're at. You get a good marketing plan. You work with your advisors. Farmers today, whether it's their own family or others in their operation, they work with farm business management instructors, ag lenders, other advisors, and try to come up with good plans. You try to optimize your costs. You try to reduce costs, but you don't want to reduce it to a point where you're hurting production. You optimize your assets. You use some caution. I always get nervous when we have a lot of extra cash like we've had in agriculture in the last year or two, because a lot of times farmers, it's a good time to update machinery and buy those things you needed, but sometimes we get carried away And if we do it on borrowed money, sometimes that can get us in trouble down the road. And you don't have to shoot for the home run, try to do a bunch of little things to get there. Kind of winding down a little where we're at, it was mentioned earlier, you know, it's ag and energy policy. When we talk about agriculture and food, it includes energy. And certainly, somebody mentioned, I think Lynn mentioned ethanol, but wind energy, most of there's a big push nationally, I think, with all the climate change to go to more wind energy. And most of the wind farms are located in rural areas. And again, they can be an economic benefit to farmers, rural communities, and we're going to see more of them, most likely. But I think the big one for us that's here right now is renewable fuels. And certainly, if you look at the ethanol industry, this is corn utilization, and again, the orange bars are the percentage of the corn, or amount of corn, that's used for ethanol. The light blue on the bottom is what's used for livestock feed. And if you look at those two things, they've not only helped farmers, because we're using almost over 5 billion bushels a year for both, but they're both keys to rural communities. Because when you have ethanol plants, you have clean energy, you have jobs, which help the community, but so does livestock. Sometimes we take livestock for granted. As I travel Minnesota, you go to communities that have a strong livestock industry, whether it's dairy cattle, hogs, beef cattle, usually the community's strong, because a lot of that money turns over in the community. And just like ethanol. So those are very key. And again, as was mentioned, if we could bump that up, not only for energy independence, from E10 to E15, if we did that nationally, not only would that help our energy independence, but it would also help rural America. I mean, if you want to have rural development and build the economy up, what a way to do it. The technology's there, we got to just sort through the politics of it. And Chuck Ackman's here, and I know his boss has been working with, we often hear that members of Congress don't work across the aisles. Well, if you follow what they're doing, folks like Senator Klobuchar and Senator Smith are working with senators from Iowa and other Midwest states on this very topic right now. So it is happening out there. The other one that's a little more futuristic, now we have biodiesel right now, but what's called renewable diesel, which again is sourced, produced in a different way from vegetable oil, and certainly the soybean is right there. If you look at the investment that's going in right now across the industry into having plants that can do this, it creates a lot of optimism, I think, for the future for soybeans and some other crops like canola, but certainly there's another opportunity, again, to help energy independence, but to also help rural economies. Another one that's kind of just surfacing is carbon sequestration. In other words, farmers and agriculture are in a unique place here, because part of the whole methods to address climate change is to reduce our carbon CO2 exposure and to sequester carbon. Well, agriculture is a place where we can reduce carbon. They can produce carbon credits that can go through a carbon market. Now I'm not going to get into the details because we'd be here all afternoon, but it's coming out there. It's a new thing. They're going to be trading these carbon credits. So, for example, when farmers use practices like reduced tillage or cover crops or programs like the Conservation Stewardship Program, those types of programs, we'll be able to have extra credits that will then be purchased by industry folks that need to reduce their carbon exposure. Very exciting, but again, caution probably needs to be taken. because most of that will be done contractually. And so I think there's going to be an educational process, as well as Patrice mentioned, we may need lawyers involved at some point, but to make sure the contracts are sound. But we're going to hear a lot more about that here going forward. Black Swan events, obviously we've seen way too many of them in the last few years. COVID is still around. We don't know, there's the new variant now. They're going to come and go. Hopefully we're at a point where we've learned a lot, we can manage it, and hopefully we don't have to kind of fruit basket upset with the whole economy again, but you never know on that. Patrice mentioned a big one, that we got the avian flu now. He mentioned the African swine fever, foot and mouth disease. Any of these things would be devastating to agriculture because we saw back in 2015 what the avian flu thing did in communities and how it affected it. And I can tell you that African swine fever would not be good, or foot and mouth disease, if they have to start quarantining off areas and restricting the movement of animals or food. That's going to be not a very bad situation, not just for those farmers, but for the whole ag economy when that happens. And of course, the other wild card is always weather. Certainly, it's nice to see the rain today. I don't think most people involved in agriculture are complaining. We're still in a moderate drought situation across most of the upper Midwest, so we need some rain. But we've seen some very extreme storms in recent years. The DeRoche storm that went across Iowa a couple years ago. We had a similar situation in parts of southwest Minnesota and west central Minnesota last year, where you have very nice looking crops and they just get destroyed. And so that's always a wild card every year in farming. Kind of bringing things home, kind of where I see things, we're going to have, I think the overall margins are going to get tighter just with the input costs. And obviously, markets are, as I just pointed out, very volatile now. Interest rates are starting to increase because of inflation. We got the highest inflation rates in 40 years. The Fed increased the interest rate by 0.25% last week. They're talking 6 or 7 more increases in the next 12 months. And ultimately, that starts affecting all of us, but it certainly affects farmers because when they borrow capital. I think we're going to continue to have this volatility. We've seen this with both crops and livestock, markets up, down. Land values and land rents, I think at some point will start to stabilize, especially if the margins get tighter and profit levels and interest rates go up. These foreign policy issues dominating the news now will likely continue for a while. And we're probably, in the first congressional district here, we're probably going to get into this in weeks, and nationally and statewide in months. The midterm election will take over here at some point. I was visiting with the folks here from Cowles Radio, one of your sponsors. Of course, you talk about economic development. Political years are good economic development in the media business right now. So anyway, you usually get a lot of that. So we're going to be into that full time. I encourage folks, regardless of what party you are or what your views are, to get involved. A lot of times these candidates come out, there's forums that are held, and not just governor elections and congressional, but there's a lot of county commissioner, school board, city council elections. Get plugged in, find out the issues, find out what these folks think, and let them know what you think, what are the important things. And again, agriculture is a whole community. Even if you're somebody that represents the city of Faribault, or you're out in a rural area, you're still part of agriculture. One thing too, there's still some stress level out there. I know the Department of Ag and the college works on mental health issues. And when you get volatility like this, not everybody's in the same place. When we look at the farm management records, the difference between the 20% high income and 20% low gets very wide. So not everybody is in that top level there. The good news is not all is bad. When you get volatility and you get these things, there's opportunities. Not just on the markets. I think Patrice talked about these processing plants. There's more opportunities than ever, especially in counties like Rice County for direct marketing, whether it's vegetables and crops or direct marketing of livestock with these processing plants. So a lot of opportunities out there. So again, I think that's all good. The last thing I think is everybody's kind of got the same goal, and that is when you're out on a farm, not only are you trying to make a living for yourself and your family, but you're also thinking about that next generation. And I know at our bank and across the area, we've seen more young people, I think, get a good start in agriculture. And it isn't just on the farm, as was pointed out. It's in ag careers. A lot of our schools now are ramping up their education programs and ag and technical education. So opportunities are good there. I guess with that, I'll wrap it up. It's been great to be here on Ag Day, and I'll take a quick question or two if anybody has it. Otherwise, I'll turn it back over to Lynn. Anybody got anything? Otherwise, I will be around. I will mention one last thing. I do put out a weekly newsletter blog called Focus on Ag. My email address is up there, or you can go on the Minstar Bank website and get it. It's free. I send it out every Monday on some of these issues. Feel free to sign up if you want. Thank you, and I'll turn it back to Lynn.
Thank you, Jim. So I just want to wrap up here and say, everybody, thank you for coming. We've had some interesting speakers that told us a lot about agriculture today. I think if there's one thing that we can go home with, if everybody works together, I think we can make a big difference. And another thing to remember, farming and agriculture is not a bad word. And I think over the years, I think that's kind of been portrayed that if you were a farmer, you kind of were looked upon as you were just a farmer, but that's not true today. And we need you as farmers. We need you also as agricultural people working for agriculture. And I think if we work together, we can all survive and make this be a profitable process. So I want to thank everybody for coming today.